think it's like they didn't officially recognize them.
In 99? Probably not.
No, this was in the 50s. This was 59. That's what he was saying, that they didn't officially recognize gay men in Italy in the 50s.
This is a period piece.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched.
I
finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and I finally watched The Talented Mr. Ripley.
This is the 25th anniversary of this movie. And I saw this for the first time, I think, right after my son was born. A lot of downtime on paternity leave. And I'd never seen this one. I don't even know if this was like on my radar, but a friend told me, "The fuck's wrong with you?" I heard like people online, just it was one of those things that like just got brought up again because it was probably like on Netflix at the time. And I liked it. I think I liked it a lot more this time too. Like I say all the time, like, multiple watches like are always rewarding, especially with like good movies. But I think this movie has like, it kind of has a lot going for it because I don't know like what people's knowledge of this movie is going into it, but also just even if you're like, oh, this guy's kind of, if you know the story, because this is like a book from the 50s. And, there's been several movies and, we're 25 years past this one. The way the movie is structured is like, it's different. You know what I mean? So like, Dickie dies 57 minutes into the movie. This is a 2 hour and 20-minute movie.
Yeah.
And you would think that would be like, sort of like towards the tail end. And it's like, oh, we have like more than half of the movie left after that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had a really different understanding of what this movie was about. I thought it was about like a magician.
Oh my God.
I didn't know this was basically the movie that Saltburn ripped from. Have you ever seen Saltburn?
I did not get to it.
So,
I will.
Okay, so I won't do too many spoilery things for Saltburn.
I'd like you to do none.
But this movie is clearly the inspiration for Saltburn, and so many like rich versus poor and the upper, the classes. And it's interesting because while the plot and the layout is completely different, a lot of the complaints that I had with The Talented Mr. Ripley is kind of solved in Saltburn. And one of them is that Matt Damon as Tom Ripley's motives almost right away. You see all of his kind of inner workings and what do you call it? His plan kind of laid out in front of him and see what he's trying to work towards. And then I'll just say Saltburn has more of a bit of a mystery to it. And I kind of wish, like you said, like Dickie dying not even, halfway through the movie. I kind of wish that there was more of a build up saving that for the end. And having a bit more of a mystery towards that. Because at the end, all you really have is a mystery of like, oh, is he going to kill Marge? Oh, is he going to kill Paul? Oh, is he going to kill the inspector, like the private detective? Like, you're kind of like, oh, he's unhinged right now. Is he, like, he already did 2 murders. What's to say like another 1 or 2, right?
I guess, but I don't think going into the movie. So obviously, like we said, based on I think a series of novels. And
It's called the Ripley series. I even texted you last night after I finished Talented Mr. Ripley. I was like, oh, because we did Being John Malkovich, we should do Ripley's Game afterwards, which is part of that series.
I read your text and I dismissed it whole cloth.
Yeah,
That was a
I
terrible
s-
idea.
well, I saw I saw a first of all, it came out in 2002, so it wouldn't be going with what we're doing. But I saw a trailer for it because you know how Prime some plays trailers for like movies that are similar,
Yeah.
and so I was like, this looks like the worst movie ever made.
Well, and then I guess a couple years after that, Barry Pepper starred in Ripley Underground. And then now Andrew S-
Netflix.
Andrew Scott playing Ripley is like kind of perfect. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard good things.
It
But
is strange though how like Damon, Law, Paltrow, they're all in their like mid to late 20s, early 30s, and then Andrew Scott and that cast for Netflix's Ripley is like in all in their 40s.
well, this I was gonna say this at some point is like a villain origin story. So it kind of makes sense that he's young. This seems like to be his first off. You know what I mean? Like because he's talented, but he also makes a ton of mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, no, I mean, but like Ripley with Andrew Scott, who's in his 40s, that's just a almost a shot for shot remake of this movie.
are you sure about that?
Yeah, it has all the same characters, Dickie Greenleaf, Marge, everyone like that, and it's basically just the entire movie, but it's in a limited series run on Netflix.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that also has to do with like we have it's we're in a weird era where we have younger stars, but because of like the
TikTok.
the shittiness of movies we put those younger stars in, we don't have like younger movie stars. Timothy Chalamet can't be in everything right now.
I was gonna say Timothy Chalamet and Zendaya is probably the only two that kind of carry that.
But I will say, like, so I'm looking at it now. So Andrew Scott's older. I mean, Dakota Fanning looks younger. I don't know what her exact age is right now. And then the guy Johnny Flynn playing Dickie
He's
looks
41.
what the fuck?
I know. Yeah,
But
I know.
he looks like a boy in this picture.
I don't know how old the picture is, but I looked it up. He's 41.
Yeah, yeah, he was born in eight. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of crazy. I don't know. It did. We're digressing a little bit here, but I think that with your like, oh, we kind of know his motivation and everything. But I mean, I think the murders sort of the first murder sort of didn't necessarily have to happen. It wasn't part of his motivation, right? He didn't start this to kill Dickie and take over his life.
No, 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 no. And you can actually see like, and this is what I like a lot about the movie is that Ripley's immaturity of handling things like this, his like anger outbursts and stuff like that. It's he lets his emotions get the best of him.
Yeah, I think that the thing that recommends this movie is the fact of how sort of immature he is, how sort of like not good he is at this, and
Yeah, yeah.
the sort of the nuance in the, even in the beginning of the movie, his struggles with what he does, right? Instead of him just being like this kind of suave con man that eventually turns to murder, he's sort of just like he's way in over his head 90% of the time in this and just sort of kind of gets lucky here and there. I mean, uses the fact that this is the 50s to like get away with a lot of things you wouldn't even 20 years later, maybe.
We're having a small break. Well, people who listen to us aren't gonna realize this, but this weekend I'm going away and we're not recording. And I think you should take that time to watch Saltburn, and it'll be interesting for you.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if my children go to bed at a reasonable hour and allow that. Because I also have to watch Hitman,
I
and
hear it's
that's
not that good.
I've heard different. I think you're
Really.
wrong. I think you're wrong. Um, so the other thing about this movie is, and I addressed it a little bit, but like sort of the odd pacing, but like that works. So the fact is, like, this is a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, right? And like you would think, oh, I mean, so that's just like a ton of setup, right?
Right.
It's like 3 minutes of setup, like
It's
3 or 4 minutes.
literally 3 minutes of setup. This movie moves at a breakneck speed. And I pulled a David because I actually watched this movie over a course of 2 days.
how many days did I think I did 3 this time, but, like, I don't know, this movie was kind of very enjoyable too, like, it was not a slog to rewatch because I was
No,
just like
I watched it with Taylor, and she was like, "Okay, I gotta only watch half, and then I gotta go to bed." And I was like, it was over half, and I was like, "All right, hon, we gotta wrap it up." She goes, "Ah." And then when we resumed it the next morning, she's like, "I've been thinking about this fucking movie all day. We gotta know how it ends."
so but my point I was making is so it's, like, 3 minutes in New York, and then we're off in the story. Like 10 minutes later, he's in Dickie's inner circle, and then, like, 20 minutes later, Dickie's like, "I'm bored with you. I'm moving on." You know what I mean? And then, like, another 10 minutes to the murder. Like, and then we have an hour and 20 minutes left. You're like, what can go on? But, like, the whole time it's sort of riveting after that. And it's like scenes feel like they take exactly the amount of time they should. They're not rushed, but they're not like lingering too long. So I actually think,
Well,
like, pace wise, it's for a 2 hour and 20-minute movie is really well done.
you could even say if you wanted this movie to be like a little over an hour, right? You kill Dickie, and he kind of gets away with it, and then you can wrap up the movie there, right? But this movie wants to tell the story of, like, basically how he gets away with it tenfold, like how deep he goes in getting away with it. And then not only does he get away with it, but he almost gets rewarded for it.
Yeah, but at the same time too, it's like, and we'll go through this as it happens, but, like, he'll have a plan and then he just won't have thought of something. So his plan at the end is like, all right, I'm back to Tom Ripley. I have all this money. I'm with my gay lover Peter. And then
There's no way Kate Blanchett would show up here, right?
he just completely forgot about her. Sees her and is like, fuck, I guess I'm Dickie again. You know what I mean? Like, just like doesn't plan for anything really. And it's also funny too that he just, like, kisses her because he thinks he's gone, and then Peter's like, I saw that shit.
Yeah.
What was that about? So I think we should just get into it because we can kind of go through the beginning quick. But, like, what I thought was interesting, the opening lines is basically told from the end of the movie, and it's almost regret, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
if I just not put on that jacket, if I not done this, if I could go back, and it's very interesting. And then it kind of opens with these cool jazzy opening credits that, like, feel like of the 50s, but then also feel like of the 90s, right? Like, of, like, that type of an opening of a movie too. Like, I thought it was, like, really kind of interesting, sort of like
It
didn't fit the movie, but also fit it, like, perfectly.
it kind of reminded me of Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see that too.
Yeah.
So he meets Dickie's dad, who's like, hey, if I give you $1,000, and he sees him wearing the Princeton jacket, he's like, oh, you went to Princeton, did you know Dickie? And, like, right away you just know who this guy is because he just decides to lie for no reason. He could just said no, but he's like, no, yeah, I went to Princeton, which I guess we find out later he just tuned pianos at Princeton. That's how he knew
So
the other guy.
I have a theory about that, because when the inspector from America comes and he's like, the only Tom Ripley that I found did not go to Princeton. He tuned pianos at Princeton. Do you think that was a different guy
That he killed.
that he killed and took? Like, Tom Ripley is not him. It's a different persona he took a while back.
It could be. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the novel would cover that, but I don't know. It makes sense to not call it the talented Mr. Ripley, and maybe it starts that way. Who knows? Talking to myself right now. I like that when the limo driver picks him up to take him to the boat, he's like, "Oh wow, you really that $1,000 is really going to help you." He's like, "You live in a shithole," and he's like, "I don't
Oh,
think."
that's what he was talking about?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. He was kind of sort of onto him, but he's like, none of my business. And then we meet Kate Blanchett right away, which she, like, asked to be in the movie and she wanted the smaller part. And then the director was like, well, if you're going to be in it, then I'm going to make it bigger.
She was like 31.
Did you look up everyone's age?
I
at the time?
did. Damon was 26. Paltrow was 21. Yeah.
Yeah. Kate Blanchett was looking real good in this movie.
Everyone was looking. Holy shit, dude. Jude Law?
I want to say,
Man.
I told my wife this. I've said this so many times after I first watched this movie, that no guy has ever looked better in a movie in the history of cinema than Jude Law in this movie. And I know Brad Pitt's been in movies.
So even more so, what's amazing is with that hairline, he
So,
still looks the best anyone has ever looked.
well, his hairline was good in this movie. It was fine. But like, I mean, I think you know what happens to him later on. I also told my wife that like, in order for other men to stand a chance, he had to lose his hair. It was only fair. He couldn't
Yeah.
keep it.
I mean, a lot of actors pull
I
it
don't know.
off without
don't know.
hair.
I don't know why he didn't just go with like, there's already so many that went with plugs too. Like he could have
He
gone that
just
route.
he knew he's like, damn, I'm so good looking. I don't
This
fucking
is not
need,
fair. Yeah, this
I
is
don't
not
need
fair.
that. Yeah.
He's like, I'm pulling Sienna Miller anyway, and then fucking that up. So like, you know what I mean? Who cares?
Who cares?
So and then Damon shows up, which is funny because Damon's a good looking guy, but he
But
looks
in comparison,
so bad in comparison until like as the movie goes on, he's styling himself better.
yeah.
He's like, you're so white. You're so white. You're gray.
Yeah. I like the line. He goes, "Wow, without the glasses, you look a little not ugly."
He's like, I like to. He's like, it's an undercoat, it's just a primer. And
Oh, about
then
his tan or
yeah.
lack thereof.
So then he gets invited to lunch. He sees Dickie messing around with the Italian woman. And then Dickie comes over and he's already at lunch with Marge. And he does this thing, and both times it happened in the movie. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? He starts doing an impression of Dickie's father.
Yeah.
I was like, why are you showing off like this? What
Really,
is
really good impression.
Yeah, I wonder how they did that. I mean, I think Damon's actually really good at impressions because he does a Freddy later. He does a Philip Seymour
David.
Hoffman. Huh? Damon.
Oh, Damon. Damon.
I think Damon is really good at impressions, like voice work in general, because I've seen interviews where he does like impressions of people.
Yeah.
So like I think he obviously has that in him, but it feels like they did something to it where they like put the voices on top of each other.
Really? Oh, I don't know. I mean, I thought he was just really good at it. And also they're kind of doing a voice, right? Like take Philip Seymour Hoffman is doing a voice that could easily be copied.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, he's definitely over the top. Once again, Philip Seymour Hoffman coming in and just fucking taking over a movie.
Taking the show.
Yeah, just so fucking, I can't wait to talk about him. So he does this voice, and Dickie's like, "What the fuck is going on here?" He's like, well, "How are you so good at that?" And then, "How do you know my father?" And then he just tells him, and it's like, at that point in the movie, is like, that's brilliant. Now,
Right.
having watched the whole movie, you're like, you're just fucking flying by the seat of your pants here. You just decided to do this. One, he loves to show off to people. And so he does it in this moment, and then it
He's
sort of
talented.
works out. Talented. Yeah. I mean, you can't take that away from him. But it is sort of
and what's even crazier than showing his impression and knowing his father and telling him the plan, what's even more flying by the seat of your pants, it's insane that he shows him how good he is at forging signatures.
yeah, which Dickie never picks up on at
He
all.
never picks up on. And
Not once.
Marge doesn't either.
Yeah, the only person that sees through him is Freddy. Marge sees through him eventually because of Freddy and because of what's happened. But yeah, that's like one of the brilliant parts of like the Philip Seymour Hoffman character is the fact that he sees through him immediately, like upon meeting him.
Well, I love the and it's not mentioned by name, but it's the juxtaposition as like when they're having that first lunch with Marge and Dickie, and it's like, "Do you know how to make a martini?" It's like, I kinda." And then Marge is like, "I know how to make a great martini. Sit down. I'll do it for you." And then at the end, they're coming into his apartment, his mansion. I don't know what this place is. It's great.
He put a lot of work into it. It was pretty damp.
And he's already making a martini for them. And Marge looks at him making the martini, and she takes a moment. I think this is the first step in Marge kind of like putting the pieces together. But she looks at him making this martini. She's like, "Wow, you've really come a long way in all of this.
I actually saw that differently. I think when she shows up in Venice, she's like an asshole to him right away. She's accusatory. Every line she says to him. So when she walks up, she hugs Peter and puts her back towards him,
Hmm.
towards
At the
Tom.
opera?
No, 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 no. Like when she
Oh,
comes at the
back
end with
in
the
the okay,
dad,
yeah.
she puts her back towards him and then like only speaks to him when like answering questions. Like she thinks he's involved with this like from the get-go when she comes back. The dad even sort of confirms that, oh, she has all her theories, or the PI said it, I don't know. So at this point, well, back to where we were, it's just kind of a lot of montages. So he's, tells him about the deal, and then he's like, all right, I'm leaving, and then he drops all the jazz. So he starts going on trips with them. There is this thing where Marge is hesitant about him right away, and like the way that's played in the movie, it sort of makes sense. But it's also, she later on is like, when new men come into his life or new people, he like forgets about me. He forgets about everyone.
So it could have been just that.
Yeah, but it sort of plays with everything else at the end. But then we just this montage of him like seeing him with the Italian girl, hanging out with him, like asking for clothes, like, "Oh, are you wearing the same thing all the time?"
Does
And
it make you think that he killed the Italian girl?
no, I don't think so.
You
I
think
don't think
she
so.
killed herself?
I think yeah, because she asked for money.
Okay.
I think that part makes. I don't think there's anything in the movie to tell us otherwise. I mean, I guess he could have. Um, and then he lies about having a fiance, and then the thing you said about like the forging signatures, and then the kind of the next thing is this bathtub scene,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Could I get in?" And he's like, "I didn't mean with you in it." And the movie, like, I guess, is subtle in the beginning of like, is he gay, or is this part of a
Is
scheme?
See, that's the thing too. Is he gay or an opportunist?
Right? Is he both? Is he bi? Um,
By being either gay and an opportunist.
yeah, yeah. He swings both way, gay and opportunity. Um, and then the next is the sightseeing in Rome, and I'll buy you a jacket at this great place. And then one of the best intros in cinema is Freddie in
Oh
the
yeah.
red car, and the line of "Don't you just want to fuck every woman just once?" Also, PSH looking pretty svelte and pretty fucking good in this movie too.
Well, only 2 years before 25th Hour, which is interesting if you think about it. And also, um,
It's the
I
same
like.
year's Magnolia too.
Oh wow, you're right. Crazy, because I was also thinking of the rest of the cast. I'm like, you know, 10 years before Iron Man for Paltrow, right? But only 2 years before Shakespeare in Love, and then you have Damon, but he's been in all sorts of shit. But Peter is played by the same guy who plays Commander Norrington from the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right, right.
So you got like this is kind of the launch point of a lot of these guys' career. I'm not saying that they're not already like something, but I feel like they're more franchised as they go on from here on out.
Well, then what's funny is seeing Philip Baker Hall at the end,
Yeah.
and like, you never watched Seinfeld, right?
No,
So
unfortunately.
he has a pretty legendary like, I think it's just one episode where he's like a private investigator for a library, or like a library cop, and
Okay.
Jerry like never
Do
returns.
libraries even have cops?
Jerry never. Great bit. Jerry never returns a book, and he plays this like overzealous cop about the book, and like very funny. And so when he comes into this, it's almost playing off of that's what he's gonna be. And
Right.
then in the episode, in the movie, he's just like, "Nah, man, you're cool."
Yeah.
Because he's like, he tries to make small talk with him. He's like, "I don't really like that kind of bullshit, so let's just get to it." And then he's like, "Yeah, you're off the hook," which is fun.
What's even insane is when he comes into the room and he feels cornered, right? And
Mhm.
he's like, "Oh, we could just go to the bar." And he's like, Dickie's dad is like, "No, no, no. I'm gonna take Marge around the block for a walk, and you need to sit with an inspector. Blah blah blah. What's his name? McCoonan, McCoon,
McCarran.
Karen." He's like, and Dude, this movie does a great job of making you think that he's gonna get caught like every 5 minutes. When it's the last 35 minutes of the movie, you feel like he's caught every 5 minutes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, um, he goes to Rome. Freddy shows up, and immediately he can just tell, like, oh, I'm like third wheel now. And they're in this like little jazz store, like listening to records. And basically Dickie's like, hey, you go sightsee. And he's like, well, I thought we'd sightsee and you'd get me that jacket we talked about. And he's just like, just borrow a jacket from my place. That's sort of like, this happens in other spots where he sort of overextends his like the friendship, right? Like if someone offers you something like that, you can't like keep reminding them of the offer they made you. Like, hey,
Yeah.
you offered me a free jacket. Let's go get my free jacket. You know what I mean? Like you gotta
Right.
just like play it cool.
Yeah. You told me you would introduce me to Mark Zuckerberg. Why am I not being introduced to him? Yeah. So that also plays out. There's a bit where the Italian woman kills herself and they find her body and they're on top of the balcony and they're all distraught about it, right? And then Dickie runs inside, but right before smashing the record player.
Yeah.
And it's this great moment where Ripley is like, wait, Marge, I'll go see if he's okay. And Marge goes, what? No, Dickie, you Tom, you stay here and I'll go see if he's okay.
Well, she is. Yeah, that's like kind of the import of what she's saying, but she really just says like, "No, I'll go." But like with her look and with that, it's like, What are you doing?
Yeah.
That makes no sense that you would be the one to go. Yeah, that's like about to happen in this. Um, and then so he like in the store, this one little part is so like obviously we always praise Philip Seymour Hoffman, but Matt Damon comes back and he's like, "You wanted me to remind you about the train. The train leaves at 8." And Philip Seymour Hoffman just sort of scoffs at him like, why are you such a fucking nerd?
Yeah.
And then obviously Dickie misses the train. We get this pretty flamboyant scene from Tom Ripley dancing in just a jacket and shoes and his underwear.
He's having his cocktail moment.
And
or
then,
not cocktail. What is it?
And he's like, there's no way Dickie is going to show up tonight. He missed the train. But no, Freddy drove him back. And then
But
he's
she
like,
knows Freddy has a car, which is such a stupid it's like what we were talking about, where he just doesn't think and plan ahead.
well, this is his first couple of murders, but I think like when he catches him in the outfit, he's already like, why'd you push the jacket thing?
Risky
Like,
business moment, not cocktail moment. That's what I was saying.
they came in around the same time. I get what you're doing. But I think it's the beginning of the end where he's like, why the fuck were you dancing in my shoes and my clothes? Like, what are you doing?
It's also this great moment when, like, after he kills him and he's in Rome, I think, in Dickie's apartment, Freddy comes in and he just looks down and there's a close-up on Dickie's shoes. Tom is wearing them.
Yeah.
And then he just kind of like does his like like his laugh, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's nothing creepier than your friend going missing and then another dude wearing his clothes.
Yeah. Well, and at this point, he's like, Freddy's here. He's like, please don't tell him about this. And then the next day, he comes out to breakfast and Freddy's like, Tommy, I got to say, this gig you got going where you just eat Dickie's food, drink his stuff, get paid by his father. If you decide to quit, just let me know. Basically, like, you're a mooch. And it is kind of funny, like, the movie from Freddy's perspective would be, like, interesting, like, because we don't, at one point, Tom's like, why don't you just say what you're trying to say? And Freddy's like, I think I'm saying it. And it's like, he is, but he isn't. Like, his exact, like, I wonder if there's some motivation from him that's like, no, Dickie's my friend. You know what I mean? I'm an actual friend of his because I don't need anything from him like you. And so, like, he's almost
if anyone's going to suck his dick, it's going to be
me. Yeah. And so then they go out on the boat, and apparently in the books, there's this thing where Tom Ripley is afraid of water. And so, like, they sort of just subtly lead to that, talk about that in the movie. So, like, he doesn't get in the water, and Marge's like, why are you not getting in the water? He's like, oh, no, I don't want to swim. Don't worry about it. And she takes it as like he's upset because of Freddy and Dickie. She gives a speech about like, when you're with him, the sun shines on you, and then he can be so cold. But it's also just he doesn't do water.
Uh-huh.
And then they're taking the boat, and he's telling Marge about some trip he's gonna go on, and she goes downstairs, and then he's like, "I have to go do some Marge maintenance," and then Freddy just catches Tom staring, and I love
Huh, how's the peeking? Huh, peeking. How's the
Tommy,
peeking? Tommy,
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 Tommy. How's the
Tommy.
peeping,
How's
Tommy?
the peeking, Tommy?
You did a terrible impression. And you like yelled over me to do your terrible impression. You
Yeah,
ruined the moment for me. I
yeah,
hope you're happy.
I am.
Good. Good. So then they find Mary out of the water, which we already talked about that. Or the Mary out of the water scene, and then Sylvana, they find her body and she was pregnant. And then Tom does this move, which is very funny. He's like, "Hey, your dad cut me off," and Dickie's like, "Oh, that's too bad, but this couldn't last forever." And he's like, "Well, you could write to him," and he's like, "Nah, I'd feel bad about that." And it's sort of like, oh, Tom didn't see that coming. He thought it was almost like a test of love, like your dad cut me off, you need to write to him, and he's like, "Nah."
Yeah,
And then when he explains later in the boat, like, "I'm glad we're taking this break, like, because you're a fucking leech."
yeah.
He's like, "You're a leech." But he's like, "We're gonna have one last trip to San Remo," and then on the train ride up, you just start sniffing him. So creepy,
Why do you do that thing with your neck when we're sleeping on the train? You do that thing with your neck.
spooky,
Spooky,
spooky.
spooky, spooky, spooky Tom.
And then they go out on. Oh, before they even go out on the boat, he's like, "Did I know you at Princeton?" And he's like, "I fucking knew I didn't know you. Like me and Mary, Marge had a bet." And then he's like, "But I mean it as a compliment." And it's kind of funny. In Dickie's mind, he's like, "I'm finally gonna get rid of this guy." So it's almost like he's enjoying his company a little bit more because he's like,
Right.
"It's gonna end." And then when they get on the boat and Tom brings up like, "I don't want it to end," he's like, "Well, no, I do actually. Like,
Yeah.
this is like breakup sex. This fun time we're having. I want this to end." And his like fear of water when Dickie starts shaking the boat, Tom like really holds the thing. Like, "What the fuck are you doing?" When he hits him with that oar, that is such a gruesome fucking injury.
Yeah. Well, that's an injury that you're not going to be
You're not
you're
coming
not
back
going to
from
be
that.
okay after
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you're not coming back from that.
Like
He's
like Dickie has a little bit of a adrenaline spurt about like just surviving this attack, right? But this is not something like, "Oh, I slipped and and hit my head." This is not an accident that you can just explain away, you know?
before that, he also gave them this speech basically like, "You're too afraid to be gay with me." He's like, "You call us brothers, but like you're just afraid."
Oh, yeah. Well, he also kind of has that in the tub too. He's checking out his ass.
And then he cuddles him as he's dead, like he cuddles his dead body. Apparently, when Dickie gets pushed, Jude Law broke his rib. Like,
Really?
yeah. So fucking Jason Bourne couldn't control himself. So he gets off the boat. I guess he throws a bunch of weights in it. Goes back to the hotel, and the hotel calls him Dickie. And this is sort of the impetus for him being like, "Oh shit, I can take over his life. Like I don't. The party doesn't have to end."
Yep.
But he tells Marge like, "I thought we were family," and he's like, "But I guess Dickie has abandoned us," putting him on himself on the same level as Marge when it
Right.
comes to Dickie. Like, "Oh, well, we're in this together, and I guess he doesn't love us," and it's like, "You're not the same as me." But like, and everyone picks up on this, and it like reeks of desperation when he does it. Like everyone notices it. It's not something that people are like, unaware of.
But have you noticed how, as the movie progresses with Kate Blanchett and Gwyneth Paltrow and Peter, he gets more and more comfortable being Dickie than he does Tom Ripley.
Yeah.
Like, Tom almost becomes a persona, and Greenleaf becomes the real guy.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a purposeful like flair to it. So he moves to Rome. I like the setting up of the two hotels and like messaging himself and then messaging Dickie and then back and forth, like establishing that these people exist
No, it's
separately.
that's a very smart thing.
So he runs into Kate and she talks about Freddie and he's like, "Is Freddie in Rome?" She's like, "Oh, I don't think so." He's like, "I met Freddie. We chatted." And I was like, "Did you screw Freddie?" Is that what happened here?
For Kate?
Yeah. She's like, we chatted. I was like, what does that mean?
Oh,
What does that mean?
I think Freddie screwed everyone.
Yeah, I mean, at least once. Every woman once. And then he does this thing where they go to get money, and she's like, oh, we're gonna go on a spending spree. And the guy looks at the passport, then looks up at him, and
He's
like,
so lucky that the Italian passports are overexposed in the photograph.
but the other thing he does too is instead of being like nervous or gulping, he's like, hey, small bills. No one can make change for the big ones. He's like,
Yeah, what do they say? The
this is gonna
confidence is
happen.
key.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next is the opera, and meets the family, and then runs into Peter Smith Kingsley, which is just such a fucking British name, and Marge, and she's like, what are you, why are you here? I thought you were going to Venice, and where's Dickie? And she's like, I don't know. It was just really caught off guard, trying to remove the rings like from behind his back, and like
Yeah.
all this stuff. And I love too the little thing where he like steals the line of like Dickie has "I hate opera" tattooed across his chest because like that's what they said about Freddie like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, you couldn't drag him to an opera.
Um,
And then she's like, "Well, someone dragged him." And I guess it was what's her name? Meredith.
and then at this point too, we also get that Peter is like interested, like basically because he's never met Tom, but he's just been told by Marge like, "Hey, I have this gay guy who you might be interested in,"
Do you
and
think
like,
Marge knew he was gay?
why was Peter so interested in him?
You don't even know if he's gay.
Who?
Tom.
I
know
know.
Peter's gay. Peter's very gay.
That's my point. But when Peter met him, he's like, I've heard so much about you. I was waiting for you in Venice. Like, very much like I was ready to meet you. Like, so how did he know that? How did he know to expect Tom in Venice and like that things might happen? Because Marge said.
So I know that Tom was lying about his fiance, but he did have a girl at the in the very beginning in New York. There was a girl waiting for him.
There was the girl that sang with him, but she was with that other guy that he was pretending to be at the event.
Oh, he wasn't okay. He wasn't with her.
No. Yeah, that was that guy's girl. And then he escapes the opera because he's like, they're gonna see me, and he tells Kate like, hey, I can't, I see Marge, and it's just over. And he then sets up a meeting. So for the next day,
What
10:30
do
at
you
a
think about
cafe,
this? Yeah, what do you think about this?
and then 10:15 at the cafe with Kate Blanchett. And I was like, what is the point? What are you doing here? And he basically, I mean, if this was his plan, it worked perfectly, but he has them run into each other. And they're like,
confirming each other's existence, right?
yeah, but also at first I was like, ah, shit. And then she's like, no, we're here to meet Tom Ripley. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, you're meeting Tom. And then she's like, yeah, I was supposed to meet Dickie, but I guess he stood me up. He's probably going back to Manji right now to be with you. And then as she walks away, I thought there was gonna be some moment where she like walks back to the cafe and like he's like,
I thought there was gonna be that too. Yeah, and what's really interesting is he comes in, doesn't even wait for her to get like out of the line of sight, which is insane. But he comes in, and he's like, "Oh, hey guys, like everything is normal." Blah 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 blah. It's just crazy plan.
Yep, absolutely. And then is like, I don't know what's up with Dickie. But she's, and then he has this line of like, I feel like every time Dickie does something wrong, I'm getting blamed for it or whatever. Just like, I don't know, just like trying to get her out of there basically. And then it's so funny. He's taken over Dickie's life. Dickie's supposed to be going skiing in Cortina, and he's just hiding in his apartment with presents he bought for himself.
And then Freddie shows up.
And then, well, yeah. And then Freddie shows up.
So what I love about Freddie showing up, right, is he's like, how did you find him? Because he's like, he's down eating at a restaurant on blah 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 blah, and he's like, you couldn't tell your ass from your elbow, and now you're to giving me directions in Venice. And he's like, you know what? That's not fair. You probably could tell your ass from your elbow. And he's like, if you were to tell me, it's 6:30 p.m. If you were to tell me that Dickie was still at lunch, I'd be more inclined to believe you that he's at dinner right now. It's just everything is just hitting him, hitting him, hitting him. And then when it's like, the things that Dickie said to him that got him so angry that resulted in killing him on the boat in San Remo. Freddy's kind of pushing his buttons here with Tom. He's like, "Oh yeah, you're in his place, blah blah blah." But he's like, "Did this place come furnished?" Because, it is so. What's he say? Bourgeois.
Yeah, something like that.
He's like, basically, he's like, it's gaudy and tacky, and Dickie would never in a million years, decorate his place like that. It's just, and he knows it, right? Like Freddy knows that Tom must have decorated.
Well, it's funny too, is like Damon starts giving him this look of like a fake smile, but underneath like the eyes are like, I'm gonna kill you. Like I have to kill you. It's this like perfectly evil smile. And Freddy just the whole time is undressing him with like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Like all of this like is bullshit. He's like, what are you trying to, and as I said earlier, what are you trying to say, Freddy? He's like, I'm saying it.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh yeah, right. The Otello, on whatever street. And then he goes downstairs and the
Meets with
landlady,
like the landlady, yeah.
and she's like, no, that's Dickie up there. And she's like, Mr. Green, Senor Greenleaf. And he comes back up there and gets his head bashed in with. Now I read, so this is the bust of the Roman Emperor Hadrian, who had a gay lover who was killed. And he cracks open Freddy's skull with this.
Very poetic. I love him. He's like, he's realizing. I think the landlady says something about he plays the piano, and he goes, Dickie doesn't play the piano.
Yeah, well, when he was talking about Dickie playing the sax too, it was very funny. He's like, we both know Dickie can't fucking play the sax. And then he takes the body out, and I love the little bit where he's like pretending he's drunk as people are walking by, and he's like, oh, my friend, I can't.
And then that guy couldn't even properly testify because he was screwing another person.
Woman. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not his wife.
Yeah.
And so then, there was one interesting line too from Damon in this scene where he's like, how did you even find Dickie in this like out of the way apartment? It's basically like, I was hiding. Like, how did you figure this out?
Right.
Like he never considered that, this would happen. And so then the next day the cops show up and they're like, I guess they found the body. And that's interesting is this lead detective is playing like an idiot, but is like actually pretty smart. But we never sort of get the end of that because he gets taken off the case. But like, he pretends like, oh yeah, I understand. But then he's like, wait, but what about this piece of evidence and this piece of evidence? And then fucking, Tom Ripley gets flustered and is like, why are you questioning me like this? He's like, oh, I'm so sorry. It's my English.
It's like, yeah, your English, it is too harsh.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, maybe next time when I come back, it won't be so harsh. I was wondering if he was actually like, we never get the result of that, right? If he was playing him or not, the detective, the Italian detective, because he gets thrown off the case because he thinks he's talking to Dickie. And then Dickie disappears, so he gets thrown off the case. So when he shows back up in Rome and it's not the same inspector, it's like he gets away with it again. He can't keep getting away with this.
So Marge shows up. She's like, what happened to your face? He's like, Dickie hit me. And then he's like, let me take you to Dickie. And you're like, what the fuck are you doing? What do you mean take her to Dickie? And then he goes and the cops are there.
I literally thought he was just going to take her down an alley and kill her. I was like, well, there goes Marge.
Well, that's a better explanation than whatever. Like, I don't have no idea what he's doing. Takes her, sees the cops, and he's like, I can't let them see my face. And then a second later, he goes to the cops, and the cops are like, oh, we found, when did you go to San Remo? Because we found a boat full of rocks. And he's like, I don't know. And this is when he gets all flustered. And then Marge shows up. And this is such an interesting part where she shows up and he's like, let her in. What's the difference? And he's like, I've gotten caught. Just let her in. Let's let this all.
And then
be
he has
over.
an idea.
Then he's like, fuck it. No, do not let her in. and then he's like, I've got to get away out. Oh yeah, the cop asks for a pic of. Do you have a pic of Tom Ripley? He's like, I don't keep pictures of my male friends like in my wallet. He's like, I'm sorry, I offended you. I didn't mean to. And this is when he decides to go back to being Tom. He scratches out the passport.
I do want to say that Marge being on the other side of the door is really sad.
Well, yeah, because like they were talking marriage, right? And
whether Dickie was going through with it or not, who knows?
Well, no, I mean he told Tom that.
I know, but
I mean he had no reason to lie to Tom about that. He sort of just the way he said it, I took it to be truth. But yeah, very sad. But yeah, so he scratches out the passport, writes a suicide note, and I guess writes himself probably like a bunch of like traveler's checks.
I thought he was going to put his picture in Dickie's passport. That's why he was scratching it out. But then I guess he just didn't want whoever to find the passport to recognize that wasn't him.
I'm not sure. I don't know what he was doing there. But then he goes down to this basement to hide the bags. And he turns the light off because he sees the cops. And you see the blue flashing light on his crazy-eyed face, which is like such a cool shot.
It was a really cool shot.
And then he makes it to Venice, where he tells Peter, I need help with the police. And then they're sitting in the station. He's like, oh, I finally figured out what's taking so long. They want this Rome cop to come. And he's like, what? No, I was told that's not how this works. Like, no, can we leave? We need to leave. And then you see the cop, and it's a different guy. And he's like, you're accusing me. And he's like, basically the cop's like, are you gay? And he's like, what? I have a fiance. Dickie had a fiance. Freddie probably had a ton of fiancés. And the cop kind of laughs. And then he hands him over the note. And he's like, what? You read this? And then he like goes to hide in a corner when it's like they've already read it. He's like, this is a suicide note. Why the fuck were you asking me questions when you have this suicide note?
What's even funnier is that Peter says something about how there's no gay men in Italy. I got to tell you something. Per capita, it's probably the most gay men in Italy.
I think it's like they didn't officially recognize them.
In 99? Probably not.
No, this was in the 50s. This was 59. That's what he was saying, that they didn't officially recognize gay men in Italy in the 50s.
This is a period piece? Oh, I did not take this as a period piece.
It's maybe the dumbest thing you've ever said.
Oh, that's why no one had a cell phone. You could have just called Dickie. That makes way more sense.
Holy shit. I'm glad you admitted it.
Yeah.
So then after this, he's
glad I found out now.
He's with Peter. That's I just want at the end of the movie, you're like, all right, major gripe. Where are the fucking cell phones? You know what I mean? Why is everyone dressed like this?
I thought they were nice. I thought it was European.
Oh my God. So so he's with Peter, and Peter's like, how could you kill people like this? Thinking Dickie did this. And he's like, I like Tom's explanation of like, well, no one thinks they're a bad person. You compartmentalize things and are just like, this is, I had my reasons.
It's insane to like self-admit that though.
Well, because he's talking about himself, and then he's like, you have this where you bury this deep down, and you have this key, and you can't give the key to anyone. And then like the moment later where he gives Peter the key to his apartment, he's like,
the key to your apartment.
Give me the key. And then this is when Marge shows up, and she is very antagonistic to Tom, and the dad is there, but she's like, oh, the dad had food poisoning, so he can't see him till tomorrow. And then when he meets the dad's like, I need to meet with Tom alone because, men got to discuss things that basically is like, my son was probably fucking other women, so I don't want to say it in front of you. Yep. And then Tom has this line of like, I feel like I pushed him away. And he's like, so James Rebhorn, who plays this character, has like such a distinct, voice, and like he's a distinct actor to me. And so when he does this line, it's like, you were great.
That's why the $1,000 went such a long ways. that makes way more sense.
Oh my God. Oh shit. They say class of 56 or something like that for Princeton.
I wasn't paying attention.
So you think Jude Law in this movie was 70 years old looking like that? Anyway, but James Rebhorn, the way he delivers this line is like the same way he yells in Independence Day. He's like, you were a great friend to my son. he put, he pushed you away, but like he also pushed people, or he thought people pushed him away. But what about what he did to us? He's like basically like absolving him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then some sort of plot device reason, Marge has to stay with Dickie as he's bathing, or sorry, has to stay with Tom, Dickie. And then as he's bathing, she finds the ring. She's like, I wasn't snooping, which I don't believe for a fucking second, Marge, the way you've been acting this whole Venice trip. And he is about to kill her. He's got the razor in his hand to fucking slice her up. But because he gave the key to Peter, that like saves her.
Yeah, first of all, I'm wondering how efficient is that kill gonna be? And also, he cuts his hand, and I love how he's like she eyes his pocket, and he just has his hand in his pocket, right? It's like nothing too concerning. And then it starts bleeding out of the pocket. I'm like, Jesus, dude.
Yeah, like I said, like one of the great things about this movie is he's not like good at this.
Yeah.
So then the next day, Tom goes to talk to the PI. We already sort of talked about this. He's like, I forgot about the rings, and this part is a little bit funny, but it's almost like the dad is like playing it up for
Us.
Marge's benefit. Well,
Oh.
for our benefit, obviously, that's the whole point of movies. But I meant for Marge, like what makes sense is him playing it up for Marge's benefit. So he's like, I want the PI to talk to you alone and get her out of here, so the PI can be like, because the PI even says, I don't want anyone to know this. He probably didn't want Marge to know this, that like in college, Dickie almost beat a guy to death. And then like, oh, we found the license plate that Dickie hid. You know what I mean? All these things, like we know that Dickie did this, but we don't want anyone else to know. And like from that suicide note, it's clear that Dickie loved you and wanted you to have some money. So we're going to give you money. And it's just like everything's fucking set up with this guy.
Yeah.
Or set up for him. And at the end, Marge is like, I know it was you. I know you killed Dickie, like slapping him. And they like pull her on the boat like silly woman with her ideas. Like, God, we know you didn't do this.
It's frustrating to see him get away with all of this, but also at this point you're kind of just rooting for him. Unless see, it's kind of funny because I was like, I'm rooting for him. I kind of hope he gets away with this just because I guess I'm worried about other people in the movie. If he doesn't get away with it, if he's called out, they'll get killed, right? And I don't want Marge to die. But when you get to the very end, and it's just Kate Blanchett and Peter, I'm just like, you know what? If he gets caught right now, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, this is one of those interesting movies where he's the protagonist. He's the one we spend the most time with. But you're like, you feel bad for him a little bit because he's sort of pathetic.
He's what we would call in the movie industry an anti-hero.
Yeah, but you kind of like anti-heroes, right? Like Deadpool's an anti-hero, but you love Deadpool. But like, he's kind of pathetic.
You can like him or feel sorry for him. I think this one's just the latter, right? And I think for me, I was just like on board with it. I was like, I don't want him to get caught. It's kind of cool that he did all this and got away with it, right? And then at the end, he kills Peter, and I was like, fuck you, dude. Unforgivable. I hope you die.
Big Peter guy, huh?
Dude, he did nothing wrong. He was so sweet. And he was like, these are all the things I like about Tom Ripley. And I was like, that's really nice. And then he still kills him anyways. I'm like, geez, dude.
Yeah, I don't know what. He was sort of off scot-free, and then he's like, I fucking forgot about Kate Blanchett.
But I think that was the moment where he realized he'd rather be Dickie Greenleaf than Tom Ripley. And Peter only knows him as Tom Ripley. So he hated Tom Ripley more than he liked Peter.
Yeah, I can see that. I really just think, like I said, he's flying by the seat of his pants, and like a new foil enters, and he's like, fuck, what do I do about this? Who do I kill to get out of this? So I guess I'm killing Peter.
Well, he could have killed Kate Blanchett, but that was the Dickie Greenleaf way out, right? And he likes Dickie Greenleaf more than Peter.
Well, but he would have had to kill like 3 other people too, because she was with her family.
Oh yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, she was like, yes, and company. So much company.
Yeah, you cannot kill me. So a little bit of fun facts. Tom Cruise and Edward Norton were considered for the role.
Wow.
But then Anthony Minghella saw Good Will Hunting and was like, I want Matt Damon. And then Matt Damon lost 30 pounds to be in this. And I guess Jude Law at first passed on this because he didn't want to be a pretty boy. And then he was like, I'm fucking stupid. I need to do this. And he was like, best looking guy ever in a movie. So what are you going to do? He was a pretty boy. Leo and Christian Bale were also considered for the role of Tom. And then after viewing this film, Tommy Wiseau was so emotionally moved that he vowed to make a film just as, if not more compelling. This film would become The Room.
Wow. You know what though? I kind of see it. I kind of see how like the Johnny character in The Room is like wanting to be Greg's character.
Yeah. And then finally, Tommy. How's the beeping, Tommy? Tommy. How's the beeping, Tommy? That's how you do it. Not whatever thing you were doing. Just make me so angry sometimes. You ruined it.
How's the peeping, Tommy? Tommy. How's the peeping?
It's a little too
Tommy.
deep.
Tommy.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and I finally watched The Talented Mr. Ripley.